Hi guys, it's Dylan. If it's your first time on my channel, thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you're a subscriber, thank you so much for hitting that subscribe button and keep on liking my videos and sharing it around. So this video is about failure. And somebody once asked me, Dylan, have you ever failed a lab attempt? If you followed me long enough with my CCIE journey, you would have known by now that I've already done a CCIE lab attempt. And actually, so let's stick with that question. So have I failed a certification exam? Actually, I have. I've failed. In terms of certification, I count like 3 certifications that I would consider that I failed. One is when I did the BCNE, which is the Brocade Certified Network Engineer certification. I don't know if they still have those. Ever since Brocade went on, I think they've divided the company and some went to other companies. So let's just put it that way. And I'm going to tell you what are my lessons from each of this failed certification exam. The other one is the CCIE lab, which for my regular subscribers and who have been following me, that was I think my second failed certification. And the third one, which has something to do with the second failed certification, is as of today, I have forfeited my chance of becoming a CCIE because I've already surpassed my the time limit that I could take a lab attempt for the CCIE. So hence I did the recertification for my other certs like the CCMP and the CCDP, which would eventually renew my other, anything below that, like the CCNA security. Though I still, some certs, they're perpetual, but because it's a certification, unlike, there's other certs that is somewhat doesn't have an expiration because you are certified for that version of the software, like the what was it? The BCVRE is 2012 and the BCNE was 2012, and I think Microsoft has their MCSA for I don't know, for 2008 and 12 and whatever, right? So you have those kinds of certifications, and I still have some of those certification. And if we're just talking about failure, let's talk about, when you're applying for a job, you have no idea how many resumes, especially when I first moved here in Australia, looking for that first job, first IT job, let's just put it that way, because I started off working for a cafe. The first time I moved here, didn't really got an IT job off the bat the moment I landed here in Australia. I've submitted hundreds of resumes, been to a number of interviews, and even went to the point of you've gone through the third interview, the final interview, and you thought you're gonna have it, and you ended up not getting a job. So it can be, at first it was heartbreaking because you thought that was it, and I don't know if you've experienced the same thing wherein eventually, we're all humans, and sometimes I felt like when I was starting off, what's wrong with me? Do I not have enough experience? There must be something wrong with my resume, and you started doubting yourself, and then eventually someone will reply, and you're gonna get yourself out there, and you will soon realize that failure is just a part of life. And as the saying goes, if you haven't failed, then you haven't lived. Because I once told a friend of mine, the world is perfect because it's not. Can you just imagine, like, every time you take an exam, or every time you get yourself into something, it's always successful, or every time you apply for a job, you'll always get it. But if you think about it, if that's the norm, then life would be boring, right? Or there wouldn't be any opportunity to actually learn. So here are like my 5 tips on how do you deal with, and these are the things that I apply to myself. Tip number 1, learn from your mistakes. There's, analyze where you got it wrong, make the necessary adjustment until you finally get it right. So going back to my first failed certification, which was the Brocade Certified Network Engineer, that one, the big mistake that I learned there was never be cocky. Because I took that exam right out, I think a month or weeks after I have passed my T-sheet exam. And back then I feel like, oh, I can take any exam, so how hard can this be? So I was going through the syllabus and what the exam was going to cover, and they say that the BCNE is like the equivalent of the CCNA routing and switching. It's just with a different vendor. And I just went for it. Oh, by the way, they had this free course online, so I like blitzed through it. I think I only went through it for like within a day. It's like, yeah, I know that. Yeah, VLAN, yeah, subnetting, yeah, routing, switching, subnetting, so on and so forth. So I immediately booked the exam. So went there to Pearson View, down the Gold Coast, drove myself for an hour, then sat the exam, and I got obliterated. So the passing exam, so they say that the BCNE is one of those low-hanging fruit exam, where unlike the Cisco exam, where the passing grade is somewhere around the 800s, the BCNE was just 50%. I didn't even get 40%. It was that bad. And that was a big, a huge lesson for me. Never become cocky, never assume that just because you pass this certain exam and you can take on anything. So I analyzed everything, really studied hard for it, and took the exam again, I think after a couple of months, and I told myself this will never ever happen again. And I don't know if I still have the result, but I did sat the BCNE again, and I got a perfect score. It was my only exam to date that I got 100%, because I was so determined to get back on the horse and study again and be focused on passing the exam. So do what it takes. If you fail an exam, or if you fail anything, regardless if it's like a job interview or something that you did on the job, or because you just didn't know, or you became cocky, or you took on something that you don't know but you feel like you can't do it. So here are like some of the tips that you can probably do, like get proper training. So unlike my BCNE, going back to that story, I just blitzed through the material. Never bothered looking at other materials that I might need. To be honest, I never even labbed the thing. So I learned my lesson, so I started setting up lab. Good thing work back then. They have all these Brocade equipment, switching, and I could virtualize my routers. And yeah, I started passing. I passed with flying colors. Even got a perfect score, and it was good. Another one is, if you need to get a coach, get a coach. Studies have shown that we're not really good at grading ourselves. So if we feel like we are good at something, there's a huge percentage that we're not. So that's why there are coaches. Coaches are there to give you feedback. Then the coach, when I say coach, it doesn't necessarily mean, you have to hire somebody, just like in the gym. It can be your boss, or it can be a colleague that you trust, and who will be there not to sugarcoat things, but to tell it, with integrity, right in front of your face, like, dude, I think you need to work on this bit. It would tell you in a loving way that your work is crap, and you need to work on this. This was your mistake, and you should be like open enough to accept that. All right. The third thing that I would suggest in terms of learning from your mistake is, create a plan of attack. So yes, you failed this bit, or you made a mistake on this one. You want to get back to it. It's not enough to have, get proper training, or get a coach if you can afford to, or have an opportunity for that. But you also need to plan how you're gonna get back at it. Maybe, so going back again to the BCNE experience that I had. So I had more study time. I set up my lab. Though I didn't have a coach back then, because the Brocade certification it's a rare certification. You probably would relate to this one, because not every company, it's not like a Cisco where everybody has Cisco's, or everybody uses Microsoft. So a Brocade is just like the other vendors. Not every company would have a Dell or an HP unless they're like end users. Anyway, so the next thing that I have is actually in relation to 1.c. So let's put the plan of attack as 1.c. So number 2 is practice, and practice. If you have a subscription to CBT Nuggets or like other training platforms, they would also say the same thing. You have to practice, like lab what you need to lab, or if it's like an interview, you need to practice to learn how to talk about yourself. I will admit I'm just one of those people who are not really good at talking about themselves, though I'm talking to you. If you put me on the spot to talk about myself, I will just tell you whatever the first thing that would come to my mind. Just like I remember there was this interview when my mind was thinking about the technical things that I could say to impress the interviewer, and all of a sudden he suddenly asked about, so what else can you tell me that, what's your typical day? And all I said was, I love my food. instead of saying something else like, yeah, I love to travel, I love learning, and the first thing that came out of my mind was, I love my food, as you can see. And so yeah, like I said, practice. Make it so if you really want to become good in routing, so let's say routing and switching, so you have to practice it as often as you can to make it second nature for you. So like right now, if you ask me to configure a router or a switch, it's going to be automatic for myself to like, oh, okay, set up a host name, set up the IP, make sure that you apply a no shut on these interfaces. Is there like a default route? What routing protocol is it going to use, or is it just going to be static? And is it going to be, obviously you set up your SSH and all these other features. Same also goes for switching, and yeah, it becomes second nature. So in the event, so you will have the time to focus on the things that you need to improve on. When I was studying for the CCIE, I knew my weakness was like multicast and the advanced features for EIGRP. EIGRP, I didn't have any problem with BGP or MPLS because those were the topics that I deal with day in, day out. The third tip that I'm going to give you is whenever you fail a job interview, don't take it personal. Don't overthink it. It has been my experience previously. Like if I did once, I wasn't accepted for the job. I was thinking maybe it was like this, maybe I didn't do well here, or don't take it personally. Think of it as it just so happened that there's another person who had there was like a stronger applicant. That's just it. And people are running businesses. I know this because I already got to that position wherein I'm the one who started interviewing people. I'm the one who had to make the decision, and sometimes I'm the one who had to fire people because they can't do their jobs, and we had to look that process again of looking for somebody else to replace that other person that we had to let go because they weren't up to scratch to what we needed for the position. So don't take it personally. And which brings me to my fourth point, which is make failure as part of your life. Make it as a norm. As I have mentioned earlier, if you're not failing, you're not living. So make it the usual. If you've been trying to look for a job, or so let's say you wanted to get into IT. So again, all these things that I'm talking about, this does not only apply for those people who are looking for a job. It may apply to those people who are planning to shift careers from, so let's say you're into entertainment. I don't know. You're from another industry and you want to move into IT, or like the other way around. So there will be times, I expect for it, there will be times wherein no one will give you've been sending like hundreds of resumes and nobody's responding, nobody even bothers to respond to you. It was like that for me because I got used to, even I'm happy to at least get back when I was starting. I don't like the feeling of, I'm sorry, I regret to inform you that you weren't shortlisted, blah blah blah. And at first I felt bad about it until it became a norm. Then there are even some cases where they wouldn't even bother letting you know what happened to your application. They just didn't bother. So you just have to keep on going, because you'll never know, the next application might be the one for you. So just keep on doing it, which brings me to my last point, which is move on. Just keep on moving on to the next step. So the famous basketball player Michael Jordan, if you're not familiar with basketball. So it's not or Stephen Curry. It's not every game that whenever they shoot the basket it will always go in. it's not like 100% they're like making all the shots go in. If you think about it, Steve Carey's 3 points, it's only like 50%. That's half. So can you just imagine the amount of, it's all about batting average or averages. So the more you get into it, yeah, I missed the shot, then do it again later. So just like what I did, I failed the BCNE. All right, let's do it again. I failed the CCIE lab, though I followed it up with another failure because I didn't get another lab attempt within the next 18 months right after I failed it, which led to another failure. But I'm okay with it. But it doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna stop going for the CCIE, because let's face it, that thing is expensive. Expensive in terms of your resources, of your time, because that would mean I would have to take the written exam again, and away from my family. I would have to, it's bad enough taking that journey, but I think it's just worth it. Some people may not find it worth it, but I do, because I value it. So, just keep on doing it. And another thing is, think of a moment in your life, let's say 5 years ago, when you failed, or a bad feeling that you had, or a moment where you feel like you're not gonna go through it. Think about that experience and compare it to where you are right now. If you think about it, back then you were probably thinking, how the heck am I going to get out of this situation? But 5 years later, look at yourself, you're still there. And that's what I tell myself. Like 3 years ago, or a couple of months ago to a year ago, I was like struggling, getting into studying for the CCIE, at the same time making ends meet, and having to deal with time schedule and with family and studying. Looking at that time, it was hard. But looking at myself now and what I've learned from it and where I am right now and with what I'm doing, I realize it was worth it. I wouldn't be where I am right now and who I am right now if it weren't for those experiences that I had back then. So I'm gonna end this video with a quote from Winston Churchill, and he said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." So you remember that. It's, there's a big difference between fearless and becoming courageous. You need to be courageous enough to face failures and to continue moving on until you reach that goal, until you reach that mark, because eventually you'll never know, that next step will be the one to lead you to the path where you really wanted to go. Or sometimes life will lead us to a path that we didn't expect. Like, I wanted to go this way, but life just took me in that direction. But all you need to do is just keep on going on. And the next thing you realize, oh, I eventually reached where I wanted to go. It just so happened that it took me in this direction where I thought was a detour, or I wanted to head north, but the feeling is I'm actually heading west or east, only to realize 5 years later, 2 years later, you ended up in the same spot where you wanted to be. With that, I'm going to end my video. So if you find this useful and inspirational, share it with your friends or your loved ones. Leave a like if you like this video. And remember, guys, keep on studying. It's all worth it. Trust me. See you. Bye. Have a great day.